Hi again. This is going to be our fourth tutorial in this InDesign series. And what we've just finished doing is creating the rough outline of our first story that we're trying to recreate. For our second story down here, it should be, and it's a little more challenging because of the shape of it, but we can start off because we're working with placeholder text, easily by copying all of this stuff. If you take a look, you can notice that it both stories feature a headline, photo, photo credit, cut line, byline, and story. They just look a little bit differently. So what we can do is we can actually come in here with our selection tool and make sure that I actually do select all of that stuff. And then if you remember in our Illustrator classes, if we just option click and drag something, that'll make a clone of all of that stuff. So what we've done is created a whole different copy of this stuff. And now we can just kind of edit it as it needs to be edited. You'll see that unlike Illustrator, InDesign doesn't quite give us as big of a pasteboard to work with, so we need to kind of zoom in and out to make that work for us. So the first thing we want to do in this case is change our headline to be to reflect what we're looking at. We usually talk about headlines instead of number of lines. We call those decks. So this is a one deck headline, and we want to recreate that here. So we're just gonna type that in. And as I type and look over at our sample, I'm reminded that in the bulk of my experience, I had the benefit of at least two copy editors reading after me, and so I hope you'll forgive me for copious amounts of typos in there. Okay, so I started doing that without even thinking about it. So now that we've changed our headline and tightened this up, we can also easily change the structure of how this story is laid out. So the first thing that we'll notice is we had a 2-column photo. Now we have a 1-column photo. And for the time being, we can just resize this placeholder frame over to the 1-column position. And we can do the same thing with our cut line and photo credit. We can pull that down. And remember, we can auto expand that, right? So how do we get this story to wrap around into the next column? We might call that kind of a dog leg. How do we get this to wrap up to this height? So there are a number of ways we could do this. We could split this into 2 actual columns, but I think it's important that you learn to work with text wraps. So that's what we're going to do in this instance, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this story all the way back up to the top, all right? And you'll see it just goes right over the top of these other 2 items. But what we can do, and it makes it a little hard to select things in here. So here we want to right click on that, select the story, right click and go to arrange, send to back. And so now we should be able to select our image. For here, I'm just going to give that a temporary fill of yellow for now, just so we can sort of see what's going on. All right. So, but still, the text is running right over that. It's also running right over our photo credit and cut line. So what we want to do is we want to create a text wrap for this image, and that's a bit of a misnomer. When we say a text wrap, sometimes we think that we apply that to the text, when in reality we apply a text wrap to the image or object that the text wraps around. So the way that we do that is we have our image selected, and then we come over here into our properties panel, and down here, about 2/3 of the way down, you'll see an option for text wrap. All right, and we kind of work through this menu as we go. We can expand this a little bit, and we're going to need to. So the first thing we do is take a look here, and that's no text wrap applied. Our second option is to wrap around the bounding box, and I think that's probably going to work for us. So if we click on that, you'll notice right away that the text that this was directly on top of jumped and now appears beneath the frame here. All right, so we also need these other settings down here. And what these are standoff settings. So if these are linked and I adjust one, they'll all adjust up. So if we can watch this and we can bump this up in numbers, and what you can see, in fact, I'll zoom in a little bit here. You can see that there's a frame around the outside of the image. And what that is, that's the standoff that controls how far the text is supposed to be from the image, right? But if we make this standoff big enough to cover our photo cut line, it's also going to push out our headline, and it's going to push out this column of text too. And so that's why in this instance, we don't want this linked, okay? So let's pull that back down to 0, unlink it, and what we really want to focus on is the bottom edge. So we can take that bottom standoff and start pushing that out, and if we hold it, it'll continue to go until we see that frame continue to push all of that out. So now here we have our text frame, and all of that text has been pushed out of view by the text wrap. So how do we get that back? Well, it's reasonably easy. What we have to do is select the text frame for our cut line and photo credit, and then go down here to our text frame area. And if we click on text frame options, it's kind of hidden down here. That pulls up a dialog box, and what we can do is say ignore text wrap. And when we do that and click on preview, you'll see that now our photo credit and cut line are unaffected by the text wrap. Okay, so that makes that pretty straightforward. And this is going to be one of the skills that I think is important to learn. Having control over a text wrap is pretty powerful and allows you to work reasonably quickly. Now we're through with most of the typography for our non-charticle part of recreating this sort of imaginary news page. So stay put, and we'll start working on images next, and that should be interesting. So talk to you soon.